know, I'm sorry. You're going to have to be in next week's video, not this week's. Welcome back to the channel. It is December. That means it's time for the hashtag December series of videos. Now, I've done some recent videos on DOS machines like the Amstrad PC 1512. You might want to have a look up here for that little link. And I had this big project planned with a gateway machine, which was going to be the bulk of my December for 2024. But something just fell in my lap that I just could not resist. And so this video is actually going to be about that. It's still a December themed video, it's just not the one I planned. So have a look at this. So I have been after a PS2 system for quite some time. This is my first genuine IBM desktop. I do have some IBM laptops, some ThinkPads, but this is my first desktop and I'm very, very excited about it. And the opportunity to buy this just literally arose yesterday. Sorry, the day before yesterday, and I went and picked it up yesterday. So this is an IBM PS2 Model 30286, and this is going to be the topic of this video. So what is this? Well, PS2 range of systems were introduced by IBM in 1987, and you'll know the name PS2 because that's carried over these days in the PS2 standard for keyboard and mouse ports. But the PS2 range introduced also VGA and the VGA connector. So the PS2 system has left a massive legacy in the PC compatible world. This particular one is a bit of a later arrival. The original models were all microchannel systems, and microchannel was IBM's attempt at regaining control of the PC market. It failed completely, but while that battle was going on, they did introduce at the low end some ISA-based machines, and this is one of those. So this is actually an ISA-based, 16-bit ISA-based in this case, 286 running at 10 megahertz. Comes with this monitor. I don't know if it works or not. There is one photo on the eBay listing of it with a screen on, with a boot screen, and so at least it implied it partially works. However, there was no keyboard or mouse with this system, so the person selling it was not able to progress past that. There were several errors on the screen, and we're going to come to those in a bit. But let's just have a quick look at what we've actually got here. So we've got the base system. It's a bit grubby. Apparently this used to be used in a construction office, so I'm not surprised that it's a bit grubby. But it's the single floppy disk model, and with a hard disk by the looks of it. At least it's got a hard disk cover here with the front with the vents and the little hole for the hard disk activity light. It's got your standard IBM flicky switch, and then the monitor is very light, which makes me think it's a monochrome monitor, not a color monitor, but it is allegedly VGA. So that should be interesting. The monitor is grubby, and also this contrast enhancing film that's been put over the top has become scratched and detached in certain places. It's basically like a microfiber cloth that goes over the surface. So we're probably going to have to remove that if this proves to be annoying. I'll have a look at a little bit more detail about the outside in just a moment. So looking at the seams in the plastic, there's kind of like powdery yellow discolor, which may be residue from building. I don't know. So both parts are very grubby, and they can certainly do with a clean, but do they work? Let's plug it in and find out. So in proper IBM style, the power button on the monitor is the big red switch. Let's turn that on. Power indicators come on. The loose bit of material that's on the front has been sucked to the monitor by the voltage. It's interesting. The power button on the system is white, not red, and we'll see why that is in a bit. But let's try and switching it on. Okay, I can hear a hard disk spinning up, which is nice. We're getting memory count, 1 megabyte of memory. We get a 161 error and a 163 error. Both of those entirely expected. That is to do with the date and time. So the date and time aren't set correctly, and that's what those two errors are. It's not booting into an operating system, but we are getting this press the F1 button. So the hard disk is thinking about doing something. I can hear it seeking, but it's seeking repeatedly. So it sounds like it's already got a bad sector that it's trying to find. right from the off. Nothing has appeared on the screen. Got a flashing cursor though. It is at least trying to be off this hard drive. I'm not surprised this is not working. So these hard drives are proprietary for this specific model. It's a modified, oh there we go, we have an error code. Data error reading drive C. Let's retry. It's kind of like an ESDI but cheaper, and it would think it was specific to this one particular model range, the 30 systems, and it's a bit of a nightmare because the drives don't work anymore and you can't get replacements because they are proprietary. There are some workarounds which we'll look at in a bit, but this is definitely not happening. Got another error here. So can't use the hard drive, at least not in its current form. Can we boot off the floppy drive? Now these floppy drives also have a reputation for falling apart. Let's see if it can read this known good floppy disk. So interestingly, it doesn't even want to go in properly. So that floppy disk is half in, half out. I can't eject it with the eject button, but it's not clicking in, which means the two parts of the drive that come together to clamp the disk are not working. It's probably just gummed up after all these years. So let's take that back out. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to take this apart because we have a working system. We essentially have the power supplies working, floppy drive might be working at some point, and we have a working monitor. So that is great. So let's turn it off and have a look what's inside. So first of all, let's have a look at the monitor. I don't know if you can see this loose bit of material here. There's a label up here at the top that says, on no account use sprays. And that's because of this coating that's on the screen. Basically just embed everything in there and then you'd actually get a poor quality display. IBM up at the top. Personal System 2 monochrome display, there you go. So yeah, so it is a black and white monitor. I thought so from the weight. Around the side we've got a tilt and swivel base. And around the side here we've got a brightness and a contrast knob. The brightness has got a little detent in it, so you know when it's kind of in the middle. Contrast setting doesn't seem to have that. Around the other side we have the red button. So in IBM speak, red means power. So on all their mainframes, the colour red was reserved for power, and specifically for turning off power in an emergency, I think. Which is why when the ThinkPads came out, there was a big thing about the track point nipple being red. And in fact, on the original specs, they said it wasn't red. They said it was like a violet colour. And then slowly, as the machine developed, they slowly kept changing the colour until it was eventually red for release, because they wanted red from the start. But red normally in IBM speak is related to power switches. So looking at the base system itself, one thing that was really kind of revolutionary about the PS2 range was just how small they were compared to, if you imagine, this essentially is the same as the AT. You know, this is probably half as big in terms of height, and it's probably, you know, 80% as long. It's a much more compact system despite having in a lot of the same equipment. This angle front, this industrial design, I loved it from the beginning. I could never afford one, so I've never owned an IBM PS2. I'm very excited to have this one, but I do love this kind of angled front. It's kind of proper, you know, Star Wars angled Star Destroyer type thing. The floppy disk drive is a 1.44 unit, and you can tell because it's got 1.44 written on the little tab. The original version of this system didn't come with a 286, it came with an 8086 running at 8 megahertz. And then this was brought in the year later to sort of fill in that bottom level because nobody was using an 8086 in 1988, which is when this came out. But what also happened was the base model had a 720K drive, and for this revised 286 version they upped it to the 1.44 standard. And the reason they started putting that on is because later on they actually introduced a 2.88 megabyte floppy disk, which is very rare. No one really talks about it, but it did exist, and it first appeared on the PS2 range. Next up we've got the hard disk space, and there is this vent here for cooling, and there's a little light here for access, and then a grubby power switch, which has got a very nice throw on it indeed. Around the side there's not a lot to see. There is a key lock here for enabling or disabling the remover of the case. Luckily it's in the open position because I do not have the key for this, so we should better get the lid off. And there's 2 screws here somewhere around. Oh, well, there's only 1 screw. I was expecting there to be a 2nd screw further back. On the 8286 version of this machine there are indeed 4 screws, I believe. So the fact this has only got 1 on this side is interesting. Looking at the back, we have the power supply on this end here. We've got a fan, IEC inlet, and then we've got a switch for selecting 110 or 230 volts. The rest is I/O. So down the bottom here you've got PS2 mouse and keyboard. Then you've got the power outlet and the serial. The serial's 25 pin. Above that you've got this video connector, which is VGA style. On the original 8286 version there was a very weird MCGA standard, which no one else used, and I don't think it was used in any other model apart from this one and maybe some servers. But this has got a full VGA on the 286 version. Label here, and then here you've got 3 16-bit ISA slots, one of which is populated with this, which we don't know what that is yet, but we'll find out when we get inside. It's a bit grubby, a bit dusty. As I said, it's been used on a building site work office, as far as I know. From looking on the left-hand side, we've got air vents for cooling, particularly as this where the ISA slots are, and the motherboard is just under here, and the 2nd screw to open the case. Underneath there's nothing to see really, but the 4 feet are missing. So it's obviously been moved around too much and they've fallen off. So opening this up should be a case of just undoing this screw, which on the previous versions were captive. Okay, so that's not a Phillips. I need to look at that more closely. So in fact, yep, that's a Torx security screw. So let's loosen that off. Yep, so the screw is captive. Same on this side. Dead fly or a bogey here, something like that. Very nice. Now the case should just slide backwards. So let's have a look at the system with its case off. So here's your floppy disk drive on the front, and here's the hard drive. And they're connected with these proprietary cables which carry data and power, so a little bit Apple-esque in a way, particularly for the floppy drive. It's quite dusty back here. I'll show you from a different angle in a moment. Okay, here's from a different angle. You can see the motherboard a little bit more clearly. It covers about this much of the case. And here's the 3 ISA slots on there on a riser board, so they're horizontal. Very dusty. There's a kind of frame supporting the riser here, which goes from the power supply across to the riser board. Underneath there is where the connectors are for the cables that supply the hard drive and the floppy drive. And then this is the little card that we saw earlier, and it's a 5250 emulator. So I'm guessing this is for connecting to your slightly larger iron, as often referred to. So this would be for connecting to a mainframe and essentially using this as a terminal rather than a PC potentially. It's an interesting card to have in there. It's an 8-bit slot. It's an 8-bit card in a 16-bit slot. We probably won't be using that because I don't have an IBM mainframe to connect to. So here's that front panel connector. And as you can see, it's connected by a rod to the actual power switch of the power supply, which is back here. So that power switch is red, that's proper IBM power. This one isn't actually directly connected to power and therefore isn't allowed to be read. At least that's what I'm thinking. Nice bit of engineering, has got a nice clunk to it. Very simple but very effective. As you can see, there's a lot of dust here around the power supply. This has probably had a lot of power on hours. Okay, so here's the motherboard. It's quite dusty, as you can see. It's quite compact, and the reason for that is these VLSI chips. I think there's 4 of them in total, and they basically do most other functions of your standard motherboard with the PS2 connectors, etc., and the graphics. I think that's all built into those 4 chips. Just here you've got your 286. In this case it's running at 10 megahertz, and it's in this quad package. There is room here for your 287. That's in a standard DIP package. The real problem with computers of this age is these Dallas chips. So this is the real-time clock, but it also contains a little bit of memory, so it isn't just a battery. And a lot of times these are soldered to the motherboard. I think we've looked out here, it looks like this one is actually in a socket. So we can take this out and replace this. Replacements for these are still currently available, although I'm not sure for how much longer, because I've got a feeling that at least one of the UK suppliers has said that they're being discontinued. So what are we going to do next? We are going to take this apart, at least to a degree. We're going to try and fix the floppy drive. I'm not sure we're going to be able to fix the hard drive. I suspect that the head is just stuck to the platter maybe, or ripped off some of the recording material, which is why it can't access the sectors it wants to. We'll have to think of a way of dealing with that, but I think the easiest way is probably going to be to put something in the ISA slot to replace it. We're going to replace this Dallas chip here, and we're just going to give the whole system a bit of a clean, particularly in the area around the power supply where there's a lot of dust accumulated. Here's those 3 16-bit ISA cards, 16-bit ISA slots on this riser card. Let's start by taking out this interesting terminal emulator. Okay, so I was going to go with my Phillips to take this out, but you can't because it isn't a normal Phillips, and it's not even a Torque either, it's a flathead. So let's get a flathead screwdriver to take this out. So I think that's the first time I've seen 3 different types of screws used on a single system. Presumably IBM had their reasons, although it's not obvious initially what those are. So the head of that screwdriver is just very slightly too wide, so let's use a multi-tool. See if we can get this card out without breaking it. So here we are, 5250 emulator. Date code on here is week 39 of 1989. So that's probably when this system was sold. I think that's right at the end of the life of this system. The PS2s came out in 87, this particular model came out in 88, and I think it was discontinued by 89, certainly by 1990, I think. So we'll try and find the user manual for this, see what shenanigans we can get up to with that. Apart from being dusty, it looks in pretty good condition though. It's got no capacitors on here that are electrolytic that are leaking. It's a set of dip switches, so it'll be interesting to see what they do. It's much easier to see those ISA slots now, and I can see more than 4 VLSI chips. There's at least 6. There are some electrolytic capacitors on the back of the board here, but they look in pretty good condition. In fact, this would have been before the capacitor plague took hold. So to get both the hard drive and the floppy disk out, you need to remove the front covers, I believe. And these just clip in somehow. Now, it'd be nice to be able to remove these without cracking or breaking them or marking them. I don't think the plastic's as fragile as Apple's, even though this is, you know, nearly a decade older. Or maybe because it's a decade older. There we go, so the front covers come off. None of the clips are pringed off, which is nice. Could definitely do with a bit of a scrub, but is at least in one piece. So to remove this, it's on a caddy which slides forward, I believe. Which I'm not sure if it's a slidey up tab. It is a slidey up tab. Let's remove the cable from the back, and then the whole unit slides out like that. So boy, this is a chunky drive. That isn't any slimline floppy disk drive. That is a full half-height floppy disk drive. This one's made by Mitsubishi, part number 90X6766, manufactured for IBM. December 1989, so this is a very late 89 machine probably. So the problem we had was that when we put a floppy disk in, make sure I got it in the right place. Yeah, this doesn't clamp together. So it must be something inside here is gammed up. It needs lubricating, so we can have a look at that. Now the floppy disk won't come out. Okay, so it got halfway down, and I needed to press the eject button to get it out. So because of the thickness of this, yes, I'm looking at this and it's got a direct drive motor, so we don't have to worry about any drive belts. The sled is pretty chunky, and it does have this proprietary connector on the back with both data and power, much like Apple do, or did. I'm just debating whether to take the hard drive out or not. If we take it out, we can give it a clean, we can recheck the connector, reseat the connector, but I don't want to break the front panel if I don't need to, so I am tempted to leave that in place, at least for now. So the riser support here is just pushed into the power supply on one side, and then it looks like it's got clips which need separating on this side to get that off. So let's have a look, see if we can do that. And there's one end, and there's the other end. Excellent. So that should now just come out. It seems to be that the power supply end is perhaps a little bit more stuck than I'd imagined. Not sure how we're going to get that out without cracking the plastic, so I'm going to be a little bit reluctant to move this. Oh, there you go. It just fell out. So 2 little tabs on the top, so you need to angle it up to take it out. And now we can see how dirty this power supply is. So under these cables, which this one is the hard drive, and this one is VGA. Under these cables is the memory. So let's just have a little look what's in there. Let's take that cable out of the way. Aha. So we have 4 DIMM slots, and they're all populated. So this has had a memory upgrade at some point, which is nice, again, because these SIMs are specific to this unit, incredibly hard to get hold of, and probably going to be very expensive. So the fact it's actually fully loaded already, that's very, very welcome. We don't know how much memory. Oh, we did. We saw a count up on the screen. It's got a megabyte of memory in. So I think these only came with 256K of memory as stock. So we've got another 700K odd in there. Power supply connector is a bit like the AT connector, but slightly different. Okay, it comes in 2 halves again, but one is wider than the other. Got some funny little things sticking up here, which also appear to be memory, but they don't look like they come out. They look like they're on cards, but they don't. So I'm guessing that's the video RAM. And then immediately behind that, we've got these chips with stickers on, so I'm guessing they are the ROM. One of which looks like it's about to fall out of its socket. We'll have to reseat that after we've cleaned everything. So here's our replacement real-time clock battery. So this is a Dallas branded chip. It's a DS12887 with an A on the end. So it's got an extra 8 in the number, and it's got an A at the end. These I got from Farnell. They're not expensive, they're not super cheap. It's worth having 1 or 2 of these around, because lots of these old computers tend to have this, and if you're really lucky like this one, then they're going to be socketed. So let's try and get it out the socket. I'm just going to try pulling it with my fingers first. That's not really happening, so let's try a bladed tool. There we go. And before we get it completely out, just be aware of which end has got the dot on it. Now in this case, I'm not worried about bending the pins, because it's not going back in. What I don't want to do is damage the socket, which I haven't done. So here's the new component. And as you can see, it is pin compatible with the old one, although it seems to have an extra pin here, interestingly. And the dot is a black dot rather than a white dot, but it's at this end, so this should be able to just go straight in. There we go. Hopefully that is a real-time clock fixed. So the floppy disk drive is the next problem. Because we can't get the hard disk to boot, we need to be able to boot off a floppy, and if the floppy drive is not working, then that's a problem. And we can't just pop in any old floppy drive, because we've got this unique connector on the back. You can make up a cable that does make a normal floppy drive work, but I think it might be better to try and get this one working if we can. So the first thing we need to do is get this sled off the bottom. So luckily that is just normal Phillips head screws. It looks like it's made of metal, but it feels like it's made of plastic. It's probably been coated in something to prevent or provide an earth of some kind. So here's the underside of the drive. So this motor is running freely. That's not a problem. The problem was it wasn't clamping down on the floppy disk drive. So we probably need to get this top cover off as well. And again, looking at this, it looks like it's good old-fashioned Phillips head, but a little bit smaller. That feels like it might be the right one. cover now is loose. And it looks like it just comes off like that. So inside we've got straight access to the heads. They look pretty clean, but we'll give them a clean anyway. But it's this mechanism here that's the problem. So that when you put the disc in, did you see how that slowly floated down and the head slowly went down onto the disc? That needs to be much snappier. Let's do that again. Yeah, did you see it slowly drift down? And same when it comes up, it's very stiff. So that's probably due to this slide mechanism on the side here. If we clean this out and re-lubricate it, that will probably fix that problem. And we can get to it on this side as well. So that's all good. I'm not going to touch anything else except cleaning the heads. Let me show you that from the side again. So as the disc goes in, this pin should drop to the bottom and this pin should drop to the bottom. And you can see how slow that is. That should be snappy. So the first thing I'm going to do is just clean up these rails just to see if there's anything in there that's stopping it from moving. A little bit of dust, but nothing significant. Okay, so as far as I can see, that's the only point of contact between the upper and the bottom sled. So let's just lubricate those and see if it becomes more snappy. And I was in two minds whether to use grease or oil for this. I've decided to use oil. Hopefully that is the right decision. Okay, let's see if that's helped. It's a little better, but still terrible. It's a little better again. Let's lubricate it while it's in the down position and see if that helps. It seems there might be a point of contact on that other side. Between the inner and outer bits of metal. It seems they're in very close contact there, so let's see if that's helped. Well, it is getting better, but it's still not great. And this eject mechanism is a little bit weak as well. Just going to keep going a few more times because it is improving. See, on this side there's a definite point of contact between the inner and outer. So I'm just going to put a very small amount of oil in here as well. See if that helps. Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably good enough for now. I think it will improve. Over time, rather than get worse over time. So what I don't have access to is the little rail that the head moves on when it moves forwards and backwards. Not without taking off this PCB anyway. I'd rather not do that if we can avoid it. Just going to put that down. Doesn't feel like it's freely moving. what we'll do is we'll re-grease these rails. Just in case that's going to help. So that may help with that. So I can just see the worm gear through here, but I can't access it using the tried and tested method of using IPA. Good quality IPA to clean the heads on the cotton bud. I have seen some videos where the heads actually become detached from the arm in these drives, and that seems not to happen in this one, so that's good. Heads look pretty clean, and there's no residue on there, so that's good. I think there was a good chance they were clean. I think we should put it back in just for now and see what happens. I'm going to leave the top off, and then that way we can see if this head moves backwards and forwards. So let's put the drive back in on its little sled. Reconnect the power and data. And we'll put in the floppy as well. It's slowly getting better, but it is far from ideal. Anyway, we're going to turn the power on and we're going to see if this head moves backwards and forwards. So nothing's happening here. So yeah, we're getting a boot error 601, which is a problem with the floppy disk drive. Not sure if it's to do with the head not moving or whether there's another problem. What I'm going to do is give these contacts a quick clean with some contact cleaner, see if that's part of the problem. Just work that on and off a couple of times. I'll see if that's helped in a minute. Okay, so I've just rebooted and we're now getting the normal 161 or 163 errors, which are the real-time clock errors. But we're no longer getting the 601 error, which was the floppy disk error. So whatever we've done with the connector seems to have worked from that point of view, but we're still not able to boot from this floppy disk drive. So something's still not quite right. Okay, I heard it try and move. Yeah, so it's still definitely trying to move, but obviously the head can't move backwards and forwards and it's throwing an error. So we do need to take it apart more and get to that mechanism that moves the heads forwards and backwards. So as I said, I was hoping to be able to do this without taking this board off. There's more connectors on this side than this side. So what I might do is take this connector off and flip the board that way and see if that's enough to access that grub drive. So there's the screw here, obviously. And another one here. Both of those are the same size. I think that's the only two screws that seems to be loose. So let's get this connector out. Like that. If I turn it around now. So what I'm hoping is that I can just flop this over. It doesn't quite go over, but it does give me access. So it does give me access to this thread here, which is probably what's preventing it from moving forwards and backwards. So he's going to remove all the old grease with the cotton bud, at least as much as we can, and then we will re-grease it. In fact, before we re-grease it, let's see if we can actually turn it. There's a hole just there, which makes it easier to push that. In fact, let's just clean that a little bit as well. So now we've shown that it does move. Let's re-grease. Let's see if that's enough to fix it. So the head is at least now moving backwards and forwards a little bit. We can also now get to the other rails. So let's give those a quick clean and lubrication. At least I can get to the one on this side. Can't get to the one on the other side, unfortunately. Let's lubricate that as well. Just going to rotate the spindle some more. And you're not going to be able to see it very well from that angle, but this head is moving backwards and forwards as I move this. Ideally, I'd like it to go all the way to the end to help spread out that new grease we put on there, which it is slowly doing. Good. Let's see if that helps. So we will screw this board back into position. There we go. So the board is now back. Let's reconnect this connector, which happened to get a load of contact cleaner on it by accident anyway, so that should have a good contact. And let's put it back in and see if that's worked. Okay, so we've got a 601 error on the floppy drive again. And the head did try and move. I don't know if you saw that. So I heard it try and move the head, but it didn't actually move. So it's not spinning the disk either, is it? So the actual drive motor that spins the disk isn't working. So I think we probably have a bad board. And we saw that the motor was spinning freely when we used our finger. So I think it's just not getting enough current or not getting a message to start spinning, which probably means a faulty drive. So I think that's going to be the most we can do to service this at the moment. I've got one little other thing I want to try first. So I'm just going to put some contact cleaner in each of these connectors. I've loosened them off a little bit, but not taken them off completely. Putting contact cleaner on this resolved the 601 error. So it may be that these connectors are not fully connecting. So we just open and close them a couple of times with some contact cleaner in. That might be enough to get that spindle motor going. Okay, so if that doesn't work, then there's probably something wrong with the actual electronics. I'm just looking at this IC actually, and the connectors along the back do look a little bit corroded. So I'm just wondering if these capacitors here have leaked. It may just be dust. They're certainly not clean. So there is some residue on the end of here, and I can't work out if it's just dust or not. But let's put it back in and dry. Just going to put the cover back on because I don't think there's anything else I can do myself to service this drive. So let's put it all back together and then go with plan B. Because there is a plan B. You should always have a plan B. Okay, so let's see how far we're getting at the moment. So yeah, so we've got a gigabyte of RAM on this unit. So 161, 163, both to do with the clock. It's because we haven't set the clock yet. But we're not getting a 601 error, so that's good. Let's put a floppy disk in the drive. Press the F1 key. So again, I heard the drive try and spin up. And it's trying to load an operating system because we have a cursor, but it is not succeeding. So this is actually a DOS 622 floppy disk, boot floppy. I'm wondering if that's actually too new for this computer. When this shipped, this would have shipped with PC DOS 3.3, MS-DOS 3.3. So I wonder if using an earlier version of DOS Because as I said, the access light's on, it's just that it appears to have hung. Interesting. Okay, something weird just happened. So I plugged the hard disk back in and tried to boot it again, and it was giving a drive failure error, but I did fail, and it's now moved on to this. So this looks like it might be the contents of the hard drive. It does appear to be, and it appears to be slightly working. The version of DOS, so we're using PC DOS 3.3. Okay, so that's exactly what I was expecting to have happened. Curious, I wonder what I did. I did like a bit of extra gold. That'll help us find out what's on this hard disk. So again, it's trying to access a particular sector and it can't. I wonder if it's the first copy of the FAT, and then when I failed it, it used the second copy. So yeah, it's definitely giving this error. What happens if I fail it? Now it's trying to load the exe file. Let's do a check disk. So yeah, it's definitely, there's a particular part of the disk it can't read. So yeah, so certain parts of the disk it can read because it's read this batch file that's presented this little menu on the screen for us. It looks like Thornhill was the name of the company that it was being used in. And on here we have Lotus 123 version 2.2, perfection. WordPerfect version 5.1, perfection. Golf 2, yeah, okay, probably weren't working too hard just then. Some survey software, some accounting software, utilities menu, some critical path analysis for project management, and extra gold and trees. I don't know what trees is, should we find out? Yeah, whatever it is, it's on that part of the disk it can't read. Can it now read the floppy drive? Yes, it can. Brilliant. That means we can do some stuff. So this is obviously not in utilities. Oh, I thought we were getting somewhere. I thought we'd fix that floppy disk. So it sounds like it's struggling to go backwards and forwards still, the head. We might have to come back and look at that, but the fact that it read the first part of the disk was excellent. That means it must be spinning it. Yeah, no, it can't move the head backwards and forwards. We can definitely work on that. We can definitely work on that. So yeah, so we're a bit of an impasse. The menu comes up every time I try and run a program. We get an error message. So if we do extra gold, for example, it starts to load, and then they get a repeating hard drive error, which I can hear. You can't see visually. So I think we're going to have to go down the plan B route, which is to use an XT IDE to get some software onto this computer. So let's disconnect the hard drive cable. We don't need that currently. And then we're going to use the XT IDE and put it into this middle slot. In fact, while we're at it, let's reinstall this. Upriser support. Now that we've got some weight on it. There we go. So does the XT IDE work? Let's find out. So the compact flash that's currently in there is the one I last used, which is the default install for the Amstrad PC 1512. So that should have DOS 3.2 on it, not 3.3. So we're getting those errors still because we haven't run the IBM specific setup yet. Okay, so we've got the boot menu, so that's good. And yeah, it appears to be working. So we have a working hard disk here. DOS 3.2 from Amstrad. I wonder... Even Gem's working, look at that. Okay, cool. Plan B is working. We can use this compact disk, no, we can use this compact flash card to move files on and off this computer, even though we haven't got a working floppy or hard drive. Cool, progress is being made. So it's always worth having a plan B. So the video is getting quite long now, about 45 minutes, so I'm going to call it there for this part of the video. So we've managed to get the system working to a degree. We've given the insides a bit of a clean. Next we're going to give the outside a bit of a clean, get a genuine operating system on that compact flash card that's more suitable for this machine. Get some software in there, play some games, have a look with the black and white monitor, and then have a look with the color monitor, see what sort of difference that would make to the user experience. So join me for part 2 next week. In the meantime, if you've enjoyed this one, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you're waiting for the next video to come out, there's some other videos here that YouTube is going to suggest which you might be interested in as well. So thanks for watching. See you next time.